everybody. Welcome to TLR Live. We are so excited that you guys are here. My name is Tyreek Wesley, and I'm on staff here at the living room. And this is a really important conversation that we wanted to have. This is a conversation where we were going to be talking about mental health. And we're so happy that you guys are here joining us. We have two amazing guests. They can tell you who they are better than I am. We have Dr. Chinwe, and we also have Janasia Davis, who is going to be introducing themselves. Dr. Chinwe, this is your first time with this TLR staff. You've been with other TLR staffs. We're jealous that you were with them first, but it's okay. Please let us know who you are.
Absolutely. And Tyreek and Janasia, thank you so much for having me. So I am a board certified licensed clinical therapist, and my practice is out of Roswell, Georgia. And I primarily focus on helping folks manage anxiety, which we have a lot of, and helping people kind of work through life transitions, which we are in the middle of one or two right now. So that's really what God has called me to do. And I love it. I'm also a mom and a wife. I've got 3 kiddos, and we are coping.
Yeah. Janasia, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Janasia. I'm a junior at Georgia State University, and my major is journalism with a concentration in PR. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So guys, the reason we wanted Dr. Chinwe and Janasia to have this conversation and us to have this conversation, because you guys have been going through so much. And we all have so much change, so much loss, grieving, all these things. And the semester's getting ready to start, and it's getting ready to look like no semester that you've ever had. And so we want to make sure that we can have a conversation about how do you take care of your mental? How do you take care of your mental health in the midst of all this stuff that's going on? And we wanted Janasia really to be like the main person to be able to ask these questions, because she's going through right now what all y'all are going through. And so, Janasia, could you just tell us, what was it like to end the semester the way it did? What has your summer been like? And then looking forward to literally starting school next month again at Georgia State. Just tell us what's been going on and what you've been experiencing that I know so many other college students have been experiencing too.
Yeah. So when everything started happening, it just was kind of unexpected, I guess. It was spring break was about to happen, and they were like, on the Friday, they said, everyone has to move out within 24 hours. And me, I'm like, I can't just pick up and move within 24 hours. And a lot of people are out of state, and I know some people are out of the country. So like to move out in 24 hours is really stressful. And they did give like leniency to stay later, but still the whole concept was just like, they didn't even give 24-hour notice, but they just said to move out within the hours. So spring break happened. We got an extra week. We were like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's okay. We'll go back. And we didn't go back, and classes went online. And that was just really tough, because I know a lot of teachers weren't expecting that, and a lot of them aren't tech savvy. So it probably made it difficult on them and reflected then on the student. And for me, I'm a in-person kind of hands-on learner, and to have to do online classes just really killed it for me. I did not feel like I was learning as well as I could. I felt like I was just taking the easy way out to get assignments done, because that's just, everyone was all stressed out, and the only goal was to pass your class, not to really like get the information, I guess, in a sense. But online classes happened, and they ended, and I passed all my classes, so grateful for that. But and then summer came, and I was supposed to be working at Windshape this summer for camp, but because of the virus, I did not get to take that job along with a lot of other staff people, which was upsetting, but they still, you know, cared on us and loved on us, even though we weren't physically able to be there. So that left this summer very open for me, which is weird, because I've been working the past few summers, and this summer I've just been like not working at home, not really like having good income, but like getting money, and it's a whole thing. But and then for the fall, just not knowing if classes will be online, because right now we do have some in-person classes, but Tyreek saying that most schools are putting their classes online. We're just kind of wondering what's going on with Georgia State, because downtown is it's getting dangerous now. So I don't know if it's like smart to even put kids out there, but just patiently waiting on that. Me and my roommate applied for housing on campus, but we are still waitlisted, and I don't really think we're going to get a place, because again, Tyreek was saying that some schools are doing one person per room, and that just really cuts it in half of who can live on campus. So we're stressed about finding where to live. Will our classes be in person, online? Will this get worse? How will like jobs be affected? Will I be able to get a job, etc.? So yeah, that's just how it's been for me.
And
Kind of all over the place.
And all that while trying not to get sick and
Yeah.
and graduate in a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the question where we want to just open up for you to be able to ask questions to Dr. Chinwe. And so I'll just give the floor to you, Janasia. And I'll jump in when I need to.
Okay. So what are some of the best ways to deal with so much uncertainty during this time?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Janasia. And just listening to you, sharing your journey, in the last several months, and doing so with a smile on your face, and even hearing a couple of chuckles here and there tells me that you have amazing coping skills, and it can still be hard, right?
Yeah.
So it's just been a lot. And in listening to your story, I heard a sense of loss. I've heard suddenness, like just an abrupt sort of shift and change, which can be really hard for our brains to process, no matter how old you are. And then I also heard like uncertainty, right? Tons of uncertainty. Like, what is this fall even going to look like? Am I going to get a space? Am I going to be, am I even going to be safe? And so this is kind of what a lot of the students that I work with, I get the pleasure to work with a wide range of ages in my practice, but a good bit of college students, older adolescents and young adults who are in college, and they're experiencing so much of what you just shared. And so when we talk about uncertainty, I think the first thing to mention is that life is full of uncertainty, right? There's so much that is outside of our control, even prior to these double pandemics that we're experiencing. And so, when we think about COVID and then now the quest for racial and social justice, I think life has shown us that things can change really fast, really drastically, and that life is really unpredictable. So the tough part is that we as humans, we really crave predictability. We want to feel like we have some semblance of normalcy. We want to feel safe in our environment. We actually want to feel like we have control. And so when things are so uncertain, that can be really jarring to our nervous systems, our brains, our bodies. And so it can leave us feeling stressed, and it can leave us feeling anxious and really powerless. And then all of the what ifs, and we start playing out all of those future scenarios. So in terms of like how we best deal with it, I think the first thing, and this is the toughest thing when I share this with my students in my practice, but it's really the best thing. The first thing is really to acknowledge that life is and always has been uncertain. And that is hard. That's the hard part of life, because we'll have a period of time when we get into a groove, we get into sort of our familiar routines, and that feels comfortable, and we sort of have the expectation that things won't change or they shouldn't change. But life is full of change. Now, granted, we have had a ton of change lately. So the first thing that I often share is that worrying about the outcome, although it's actually human nature, doesn't always help. So that's the first thing that we want to just be aware of, is that change is inevitable. Life ultimately is really uncertain. And so what is it that we can actually have control over? And what that is our mindset. So I talk to my students and my clients a lot about really what Romans 8 tells us about renewing our mind and really fixing our thoughts on those things that are good, praiseworthy, and those things that are actually within our control, which is our mindset. So being able to kind of tolerate, and sometimes, and I know this sounds crazy, but embrace a certain level of uncertainty can actually be really good for your mental health.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like for me, that's what's helped me a lot is just keeping a positive mindset because you're in control of how you react to certain situations. And I think just getting the habit of just saying, okay, I don't have to be mad about this, but just really what I do have and just be grateful for the things that I have. It like helps me to stay positive throughout all of this. So I like that response.
And Janaisha, guess what? You can actually be mad too.
Yeah. That is true.
Yeah, you can feel your feelings, and then we just don't want to get stuck there, right? It's okay to feel sadness and anxiety and even a little bit of helplessness. You just don't want to get stuck there. So I love what you said about gratitude, which is huge when it comes to optimizing your mental health.
Yes, I love that. So kind of similar to, I guess, the last question, but how would I keep peace when I feel so out of control and anxious?
Yeah, I think the first thing is really asking yourself how much worrying is going to change this certain thing. And the answer is 100% not not much, like, or not at all. And so then that's where the mindset shift kind of kicks in. So what is within my control when there's so much that's around me that is up in the air, that shifts every day, that's uncertain? When we get misinformation, I mean, that's the thing that I think is really tough right now, is that we hear something from the news today and then the next day it shifts, and that can really, really increase anxiety, in addition to not knowing when this period of stress is going to end. So all of those things can really cause stress levels to go up, but that's not good for our mental health. So instead of kind of worrying about a specific outcome, really asking yourself, is there something that I can do in this moment to sort of cope with it emotionally? Is there something that I can do actively to try to manage the situation? So for example, when, my students are talking about, their health, and I think there's a misnomer, Janaisha, and you tell me with your friend groups, there's a misnomer that young people don't care about catching COVID. That has not been my experience at all. It's like, oh, it's the young people that are going to the parties or going to the beach and they're spreading it and they don't care about their elderly grandmothers. That's not been my experience at all. Young people they do care. They're trying to balance it with peer socialization, which is also really, really important. But if you are feeling so worried about getting sick or bringing something home to your parents, just shift your brain into thinking, okay, what is it that I can do to really offer myself the best chance of staying healthy? And so we know that regularly washing our hands, using sanitizer, cleaning surfaces, avoiding large crowds. If you're with, the same group of friends that you've been with, try to maintain that friend group, not mixing it up as much as necessary. And then here's the other thing, like really finding space to acknowledge how hard this is and to connect with other people who are maybe having a difficult time, and you guys lift each other up. And if there's someone else that's in your community that is having a really difficult time because they're immunocompromised or they're part of that vulnerable risk population, what can you do to offer help? So similar to what you mentioned earlier, expressing gratitude, looking at what's positive, and also looking at what's possible, I think is really the best way to keep your peace.
Dr. Chinwe, could you define what coping means?
Yeah, coping is being able to manage without feeling overwhelmed. Yeah. And there are different ways to cope. And of course, Tariq, you know this, there's healthy coping and there's unhealthy coping, but coping is managing that sense of life is getting to be so big that I can feel sort of swept over or swept under the wave.
Yeah, one of my bad habits of coping is eating. I'm an emotional eater. I'm like, this is too much.
Yeah, I think during that first week, we bought out all the chips and brownies at Publix. That first week, we're like, we don't know what's happening, but we're not getting fruit, which is really interesting.
Right. So I know for me, and I'm sure there's other college students who have done this or who are doing this, we try to compartmentalize, right? We say, okay, school is going to be here, family's here, whatever else is here, and I don't let my emotions from the others I don't let them bleed over, right? I'm here now, this is all that matters. Is compartmentalization, is it a real thing, and is it a good thing? Like, should we kind of be approaching all of this like, here's school, here's my job, here's housing, here's these other things, but I don't let them blend together emotionally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is a real thing, and it can be a good thing. It could actually be really healthy, and it can be something that gets in the way. So let me kind of break it down a little bit. So compartmentalizing, for those who aren't sure exactly what that means, it's just our ability as humans to sort of block out or partition, separate certain experiences from our kind of immediate awareness. And so it's not always a bad thing. So if you think about, let's say you got into a fight with your loved one, your girlfriend, your spouse, or a really good friend, and then you've got to go and work a shift within that hour, right? And so think about, for example, the type of work that I do, right? So and there's so many different examples of work that can be impacted by excessive emotionality, but I see people who struggle with depression, trauma, and anxiety. And if something has happened in my life earlier that day and I've got a client at noon, I have to be able to compartmentalize, right? If you have a fire at your house, you want the firefighter not to be thinking about the fight with his wife, right?
Right.
So it's actually really, really important to be able to shift our awareness so we can do the important work that God is calling us to do. And so that's also an example of when people say live in the moment. To be able to live in the moment, you really have to kind of push some things that can be distressful behind you. And so that's how we function as students, like you said, being able to go to classes, study for a final exam, be a good daughter, be a good son, be a good grandson, work. All of those things are really, really important. And if we are dealing with like a big life situation, it's easy for those things to sort of bleed in different areas of our lives. But it also is really important to be able to separate that so you can focus on the task at hand. So, compartmentalization is really your ability to lighten the baggage, the emotional baggage that you carry with you. And when you have a lot of things going on, Tyree, it's necessary. Do you want to know how it's unhealthy?
Yes.
It's unhealthy, and I do see this sometimes with clients, especially if you've gone through a lot of stress or early trauma. It's unhealthy when we emotionally detach.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are mentally distracting yourself from connecting with friends and loved ones, that can be unhealthy. And so that's something that we really want to pay attention to. So in the short term, perfectly okay. Long term, it might be an indication that you're really dealing with some chronic stress.
Yeah, that's great. Maggie.
Yeah, of course.
So like going along with the, I guess, not pushing people away and etc., what are some signs that you're lonely? And then to back, like a second question would be, how do we deal with loneliness? Because I know for me, when quarantine started, I was just really feeling isolated from not being able to see my friends. And I would get to a mindset where I was just like, well, I don't want to talk to anyone. So I would just push people away and kind of just put that loneliness on myself, even though I wasn't lonely. So how do we avoid that?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Janasia. And thank you for sharing that. And so what's interesting is that loneliness was considered an epidemic prior to COVID. I don't know, did you know that?
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in our nation, more and more people were calling into mental health crisis lines and expressing loneliness. People were scheduling their very first therapy sessions because of loneliness. So just imagine how exacerbated that feeling was when we were told that we needed to socially isolate. So it's been a big problem. So I think the first thing that I want to share with, all the students that are listening is that feeling lonely is not a bad thing. It's not abnormal. So in the short term, having those experiences of wanting to be connected, wanting to be around people is actually okay. That's not considered problematic. So we all deal with it from time to time. The issue is that, chronic loneliness, or kind of a little bit what you described, Jalaisha, when you're just not in a good place, because loneliness can be connected to sadness or depression, where you're pushing people away. So inside, you want to feel connected, but because of certain circumstances, you aren't feeling connected. So that's something to really, or you're not doing what it takes to connect with your loved ones. So that's something to pay attention to. The signs, really, people might be surprised, they're emotional, but they're also physical. And so signs can be sadness. Again, loneliness is linked to depression. You can have like an overwhelming feeling of isolation, even when you're like around other people. So people don't realize that you can be lonely and be with other people. Were you going to say something, Terry?
Well, no, I was going to say, we hear that a lot in working with college students, right? It's like that first year, those years in college, where you're literally surrounded by all these people on campus, but there's no connection. And so you feel lonely in a sea of people. So yeah, I was agreeing. Yep.
So let me tell you, I have a very best friend who works at a Christian university in Nashville. She works at Belmont, so it's a well-known university. She worked in the college counseling clinic, and we've been friends for a long, long time. She shared with me a couple years ago that she has never seen so many freshmen come into the counseling office and say that they don't know how to make friends.
Yeah.
Freshmen, like that was like a big thing. And I remember when she told me this a couple of years ago, I was like, oh my goodness. But in working with students and talking to other college therapists, that's actually a really big deal, as you mentioned, to kind of look around you and see a sea of people, but not feel connected.
Yeah. I know for me, so I was an Army brat. So by default, we moved a lot. So we had to learn how to make friends. And when you live in an Army-based community, so many people are coming and going anyway. Yeah. So it's like you have to learn how to be able to connect with people. But for those that I think about, like Janae, you speak on that, right? Because I think you're part of that generation where like I remember, and I'm not even that much older than you, but I remember before there was an internet. Like I remember the first time my teacher was like, "Hey, this is the internet," and I'm like, "What?" And I was like, third grade. For y'all who grow up in this internet world of like y'all stay connected, like speak more to that, right? Like the loneliness and all that, and like the hardness to make a friend.
For me, like, because you were talking about freshman year, I definitely can relate to that, because in my freshman year, I knew people from my school that were going to Georgia State, but I just really felt isolated, and like I had no friends. I couldn't eat by myself. I couldn't go anywhere by myself, because I felt like, oh, well, people are going to look at me and think I have no friends. But I think going through college and going through that process and just learning to have to get out of your shell and try new things, because I hate change. I really do. Yeah. So for me, college was like, okay, I have to actually like join clubs and stuff and make friends and actually put in the work, versus you went to high school with these kids you might have known since middle school kind of thing.
So it was one big change.
Yeah, it was very overwhelming, and I was just like very sad and just like kind of in that lonely phase. But then once I decided, hey, I don't have to feel this way, I don't have to isolate myself and not have friends, I started joining different organizations. I started going to TLR and just making friends and getting opportunities. So I just really think that like welcoming the change is good. And also the internet and social media make it so much easier, I feel like, for people to become friends. Yeah. I don't know. Like for me, I just feel like they have like the freshman things that just have all the freshmen for that year, and you can add them and talk to them, make friends. And
like nowadays groups. Yeah,
exactly. They do FLCs when you're a freshman, so that you're kind of forced to be around the same people consistently. So I think the internet and like just technology works in our favor sometimes, but it's still, you can still feel lonely. So
yeah, I love that. And it's so important that you took action, because loneliness actually can really take a big toll on us, because we humans are social creatures. God created us to be in relationship. And so the risk of loneliness, not to scare anybody, but as a mental health advocate, and I have to point out, is pretty severe. It can lead to depression. There's some research around premature death, but prior to that, it affects your sleep. It makes you anxious. It makes it difficult for you to actually concentrate on your work, and it increases stress levels. So it's really important to do exactly what you did. So when we talk about how to kind of manage loneliness, it really is about sometimes stepping outside of your comfort zone. And here's the thing, like, I'm really big on like really tiny incremental steps, because life can be overwhelming. And when you talk to somebody who's lonely, or when you talk to somebody who has maybe a level of social anxiety, you don't want to overwhelm them. So what I always tell my students is just find moments of positive interactions in your day, but you want to seek those out on the daily. So daily positive events can really impact loneliness. So just those moments of interpersonal connections. So when you are just telling yourself, I'm going to leave my dorm room, or I'm going to go to an open market, Ponce. I'm going to go to a mall. I'm not going to do anything that's monumental, but I'm just going to be around other people. Just someone looking at you and smiling, and maybe even possibly making some small talk, can actually do wonders.
Now, in the face of COVID, what would that look like, right?
Yeah,
Give
I
me
think
examples of what that could look like.
Yeah, I think it can still happen. I've got to tell you, when I mask and all, my family, we walk this nature trail. We try to pick a time in the day, especially on the weekends, is when we can have time to do it, where it's not super busy, and you can tell that people really are socially distancing, and we're masked. But I'm telling you, I feel like there's even more of an urge to connect, where people are looking up and they're prolonging their gaze, and they're stopping their dogs because they want you to like connect with their dogs, and they're stopping and they're talking to my children. So I think friend groups can go on nature trails. I think absolutely, virtual is the way. I mean, we thank God for technology. It can be tiring, it can be excessive, but for young people, that peer group is so important. So I hope I can say this, but have a virtual, mocktail hour, happy hour, mocktail hour, okay? I know.
Make sure it's just, soda.
Right. So I have friends that get on every week. I haven't joined them in a while, and they do a game, and everybody sort of rotates, and the leader will kind of decide, what the game will be. It'll be some funny version of Jeopardy or Uno. I've even done chess online. So because we don't know what's going to happen, and that's such a good question, because we could be on the verge of a lockdown again, right? To the degree that we had before. So we are going to have to find ways to be creative, but it's so important to have those daily positive interactions.
I know for
I'd
me.
also want.
Oh, please. No, go.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, to all the students watching, I would also just like to add that I've valued over this time just simple text, FaceTime calls, etc. Which I didn't used to really care about too much, because I was like, I can see these people, but like being that friend, or having a friend that's texting and reaching out to you, even when maybe they're just thinking about you, maybe they notice that you're at a low point and they're just checking in. Those can be so powerful and just give you like such encouragement. What did I say? For me, I'm pen paling kind of with this little girl from Upstreet, Nora. Tyreek knows, and she sends me these letters, and it's so encouraging, just like to have a kindergartner send me like these words of just encouragement, and just telling me about her summer, and just like you said, the little things, just focusing about that and just focusing on those can help a lot. So
I was gonna say, my sister-in-law is actually pen paling with an elderly woman, and so even that, right? So that even the people who are like some of the most vulnerable during this time are longing for connection as well. And that could be a way that maybe that's something we should even think about setting up, because I think that'd be really helpful. But for us, for me, game nights and movie nights have been the go-to, right? So
Yeah.
we'll all pick a movie and we'll watch it, and then like right after the movie, we'll do a Zoom call and we'll just talk about the movie. That's helped me out a lot.
It's like so much fun. And remember the virtual DJ dance parties in the beginning
All
too?
Oh
those,
yeah.
yes, all those have helped. We talked some about social media, and with the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and this pursuit of justice and this this country's reckoning of its racism and all these things, right?
Yeah.
It feels like social media has become even more powerful because it's where you get your news from, and it's where you can engage in resistance, right? And I know for a lot of young people, a lot of college students, this is their SCLC, this is their SNCC, this is their Dr. King marching moment situation. So they want to get engaged and they want to make the world a better place. But I also know, for me personally, it can become like it does something to you mentally because one, we live in a racist country, but two, it seems like every day there's another tragedy, there's another video, there's another thing to be fighting for.
Right.
How do you, in your professional opinion, how do you engage in social justice, reform, resistance, and continue to practice self-care and all those things? Because they can't be mutually exclusive.
Right. No, that's such a great question. And I cannot tell you how often I get the same question from young people that I know and students and just people who care. So social media, as you mentioned, is powerful. It's a way that we stay connected. It's a way that we learn about what's going on, because so many of us want to stay informed, and young people want to be active. This is, as you mentioned, their movement. And I think it also reminds us, not only are we like connected to the world technologically, it sort of reminds us that we're not alone. Remember, we were just talking about loneliness, right? It makes you feel a part of something, but the key really is balance. So the quest for racial justice, I really want the students to hear this, is the long game. It's a long-term journey, and everybody has to find balance and pace, and we can't look to other people to determine what our limits are and to determine what part that we play. It's very exciting to be a part of a movement that I feel social justice is a Christ-like movement. It's servant leadership. It's about taking care of those who are less fortunate, less able. All of those things are really valiant and important, but each of us we really have to take care of ourselves. So I kind of want to take it maybe in two categories. The first category is the social media piece. I'm like you, Tariq. I actually engage social media. I like social media. I don't think it's like, this horrible thing that's really going to negatively impact mental health as a whole. I think it's really important for each person to find out what's going to be a good balance for them. So I always encourage people to schedule a time. It could be 3-4 hour span. Not that you're going to be on it that entire time, but just say from this time to this time, I am going to pick up my phone, see what's going on, check in, but it's really important to step away. So as with most things, really having a sense of balance is really going to be key. And then the other thing that I've recognized, I've also heard from students, is that sometimes, and Jaleesha, please jump in, sometimes they will see posts, either written posts or images, and it makes them feel less than. It makes them feel like they're not doing enough. It makes them feel like, just the comparison trap, right? And so I always say to my students, use social media and the posts, even if it's about, racial justice, use it as inspiration rather than feeling like you're lacking in some way or you're not doing enough, because you again have to take care of your own mental health needs. And so the person that's posting and maybe seemingly super active, we don't know what they have going on in their life compared to what you have going on in yours. And so you want to also be really selective about who you follow and be mindful about how social media makes you feel. So I know for me, the first 15 minutes, I'm excited, I'm connected, I'm rejuvenated. And then after a while, it just feels a little numbing, and I don't like that feeling for myself. So that's sort of a telltale sign for me that it's time to kind of like log off. Or if I read something, and I tell people this all the time, that just makes you feel, I'm not sure if it's going to cause you to stretch and grow, discomfort is okay. But if it makes you feel badly about yourself, you might want to unfollow that person. Yeah. Because mental health is really so important, especially right now. And if I may just add specifically to the quest, around the quest for social justice, Tyreek, I'm just reminded of the scripture in Ecclesiastes, and it's very long. But the first part that's coming to mind is there is a season for everything. You guys remember that? There, in everything, to everything, there is a season, there's a purpose under heaven. And so there's a time for silence. There's a time to speak. There's a time for war. The scripture says there's a time for peace. And so the way that I interpret that also is there's a time for protest and there's a time for rest. So it's so important because, again, the fight for social justice is going to be long, and we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, and it made me think of this one person I follow, and this is her full-time job, right? Her name is Brittany Pecchietti, and she posted she did this long thread on Twitter where she talked about like fighting for her own mental health while this is actually my full-time job, like fighting social justice and doing all these things. And for someone who is a professional at this to say, one of the biggest things she said was, I give what I have, and then that's it. And some days I have more than others, but she said, she's a wife. She said, but what I won't do is run myself in the ground, and I have nothing to give to the person that I pledge to spend the rest of my life with.
100%, because that's the danger. The danger is that you can get so consumed that you run the risk of burnout. You run the risk of, there's a such thing called compassion fatigue. You run the risk of having a lot of symptoms of anxiety and depression that really does cause an imbalance for you emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. So I love that you share that.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Janasia?
It made me think of when I was talking to you about like the TikTok thing and when the protests were just starting out, and I really it was really emotional for me and just really took a toll on like my mental health. And I had to acknowledge like, hey, I'm starting to get to a point where I don't feel encouraged or motivated. I'm just really falling down this, kind of sad spiral. And I just had to take a break and go, okay, enough of that today. Like I want to be in the know, but also don't want to, like your friend, don't want to hit the point of just wrecking myself mentally because I just want to be so, keeping up to date. And it's good to keep up to date, but like to a certain extent. So
yes, absolutely. That was good. You recognize that, Jaleisha.
Yeah. Trying to be more self-aware.
Even with the videos, right? Like I heard someone say, and this was another person who was like a full-time activist, they said they don't watch them anymore. Yeah. She actually said, I can read about what happened.
Yeah.
And it can give me the information I need, and it doesn't impact me in such a way as far as like the videos do. You know what I mean? And so I think that's another thing that's super important.
Yeah, Tariq, I want to really emphasize that. So there is a thing called re-traumatization. So viewing videos of violence, especially if you are a Black person, seeing another Black person being harmed or killed over and over again, and people talking about that over and over again, that is extremely difficult for your nervous system and it's harmful for your mental health. So she's absolutely right. Your brain thinks in pictures, so the visual is much more jarring. So if you want to stay informed, I actually will say, I'm not watching the news. I'll ask my husband or my sister, we talk often, just give me the rundown. Give me the rundown. And I'm a mental health therapist. But again, I have to protect the space in which people are coming, traumatized and anxious and depressed, right? So I am the tool, and I really want each student to kind of think of themselves in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Janae, you are going back to school this fall.
Yes.
How are you feeling about going back to school? And then, Dr. Chinwe, we would love just like, how does she stay motivated, right? How does she, and if also for students that aren't going back to school, but everything's online, how do they function in that space where it's like they're in a space that they don't want to be in, but they still have to be motivated and be productive?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think staying motivated in a situation like that can be tricky. It can be tricky. But two things that are coming to mind for me right now is setting aside realistic expectations for yourself is number one. And number two, once again, taking care of yourself, and it just not be something that you say, but something that you actually do and schedule within your week. Because like anything, you have an agenda, you have a calendar for a reason because you think that this thing is important. So is your self-care. So the first thing that I would say to students who are going back to school and they're worried about their motivation is be okay with not being super highly productive because we are dealing with unusual times and circumstances. And so don't be so hard on yourself. Be okay with setting sort of daily goals. And I'm a big person that says progress, not perfection. So instead of saying, I'm going to complete this entire paper, read all of these chapters, give yourself permission to set a timer and see how much you get done in 30 minutes. So to me, that's like a tremendous sense of accomplishment that I can really focus within a certain designated period of time and knock things out. And so the students often use just set 5 minutes. And they'll be like, well, that's nothing. Because if you're struggling to start and struggling to feel motivated, 5 minutes may be all that you can give it. But once you've started, that really does kind of create a little bit of momentum. So that's one thing. Keep progress as a mindset, not perfection, and just do a little bit at a time. And then again, back to mental health, we have to stay connected. And Tyreek, you asked earlier, how do we do that when we're socially distanced? We have to get creative. But when it comes to classes academically, my students are telling me, the ones that took classes this summer, it's been really fun to do video chatting. It's been really fun to get together, after class and discuss, whatever the lecture was. And Tariq, you mentioned discuss a movie. So those things can continue, and that can be very motivating. So you're not just in your dorm room or at home doing work in isolation.
Yeah. Janae, did you have any more questions, any follow-up or anything that you wanted to ask before we get off?
No.
Okay. Well, Dr. Chinwe, Janae, thank y'all so much for your time. And Dr. Chinwe, I would love, just in closing, right, when we do put the block on our calendar that says self-care, what should go in there, right? Is self-care escapism? Is it like what does that look like? Yeah. And then could you please let us know any resources that we could share with our students that they could engage and begin this journey of social health?
Yeah, so that's really good. And I think I want to tie this into the question you asked about folks that are going to be home, and just how difficult that's going to be staying home this semester when the expectation is, okay, it's fall and I need to be back in. So to me, coping, again, managing really overwhelming emotions starts with like the basics. So self-care to me is the basics. So it's not going on an expensive vacation or doing a spa day or going to Disney. All of those things are wonderful if you can afford it. But for me, students, I so encourage you to set your schedule ahead of time on a Sunday, kind of look at your calendar and just think about your week, just 10 minutes to think about your week. Plug in those things that are going to make you feel good, that are going to feed you emotionally, physically, spiritually. Have a set wake up time. That routine is really good for your mental health. Have a time where you are working, have a time where you are playing. And if you're working from home, if you're taking, have to take classes, remember that if you're done at 3, try not to linger on your laptop. If you're done with your assignments at 3 or class at 3, give yourself a break, cut it off, and then do something else completely away from the computer. So that means no surfing the internet, no spreadsheet. This is not the time to do your budget. Really just separate. That's really, really important. And then also have something fun or personal that you're working on that's not just school related or doesn't feel like an obligation, that helps you to feel motivated and keep your energy up. And then lastly, the diet. It's so boring to talk about. And I think it's also a misnomer that college students don't care about their diet. They do, especially this generation. So you want to really be careful what you put into your body. Sugary foods and all of those things can make you feel sluggish and can actually impact your mood. So you want to really be mindful of that. So I think that's probably it for now.
That's good. Any resources you want to share that they could?
Yes. If you are interested in getting counseling, and it doesn't have to be any big issue that's going on, just what we've been dealing with in the last few months is enough. There's an excellent resource that I want to offer. It's psychologytoday.com. It is a database, a directory of therapists all across the nation. And what I love about this particular resource is that you can filter by zip code, you can filter by gender, if you prefer a male or female therapist, you can filter by insurance, and their pictures. So you can also, see what your therapist might look like. Many therapists are loading videos. You get to really hear how they talk about a particular issue, and you can also filter by presenting concerns. So if you have a particular need, you can filter and it'll give you a list of resources. If you are a person looking specifically for a Black therapist and you're female, looking for a female Black therapist, there's a website called Therapy for Black Girls. If you're looking for a Black male therapist, there's Therapy for Black Men.
Excellent. And I've gone to counseling, and it changed my life. It was things that I thought I dealt with that I hadn't. There were things that I didn't realize. So I think the stigma definitely is being lifted. It needs to continue to be lifted because, man, it was one of the best things I could have done for myself. It made me a better husband. It made me a better pastor at work. It made me a better father. And so I would encourage everyone to do that. Janae, any last words you want to say to your fellow peers as they get ready for the fall semester and all of this stuff that's going on?
I agree with her on the self-care thing. I set aside Sundays for my self-care, and I'll do a face mask, plan for the week if I have anything to do, but right now I don't. But when school starts, it'll be good to have a day where you can just look ahead, plan assignments, and just stay on top of things. And good luck. This year's going to be very out of the ordinary, I feel like, for a lot of people. So just cope with it the best we can. And we have TLR family here. So if you guys need anything, just reach out.
Yes. Please continue to reach out to us. I know y'all can find us on Instagram and on Twitter. And we love you guys. Thank you, Dr. Chinwe. Thank you. So great. And we are going to end. I will see y'all later. I'm Tyreek Wesley. Y'all have a good week.